Hi guys, Elle here. So I figured, every tarot channel has to have a video about tarot deck modification, right? so here's mine. I trim my decks as infrequently as possible. It is not my favorite thing to do. I will show you the decks that I have trimmed and exactly how I go about it. It's sort of a last resort for me. I don't love to do that. I do, however, love to edge my decks. I have way too many edged decks to show you guys all my edge decks, but I'll show you some examples of the different markers that I use and how to get different effects and some of the crazy shit I've done on here, or with my tarot decks, with my tarot cards. Mostly I use markers for edging my decks. That's my secret stash. Secret stash. I'll show you guys some of the ones that work or have worked really, really well for me. Now, there is one other type of tarot deck modification that I'm not really going to talk about during this video, and that is where you change the backings of a card. What's her name? Veronica Jude just posted, well, not too long ago anyway, a video about how she did that on the video. She kind of walks you through it step by step. So when I go and actually try it for the first time, I think I'm going to kind of follow along with her video. But you guys might know the deck that I would consider, the only deck that I would consider changing the backs on is this guy, and I love this deck. It's the Tarot of the Tattoo Age. I have a review of it up. It's such a cool deck, but I'm just not a huge fan of the backs. Never have been. So I would love to change up the backs on these. I think they'd be good cards to do that with too. So I'll make a video if I ever get around to doing that. That'll be fun. So real quick, before I show you guys my treasure chest of markers there, I do want to show you exactly how I, in the past, have gone about trimming my decks. Like I said, it has to be something that is just bothering the shit out of me. Excuse me, for me to even consider cutting my cards. I know a lot of people are able to buy 2 copies of a deck and save one in case they mess up or whatever, and I've never been in a position to be able to do that. And I don't wanna fuck with them. Most of the time it doesn't bother me to that great of an extent anyway, even if the borders are a little bit annoying. Like that I wouldn't touch. A little bit of an annoying edge or border, I would just totally leave alone. It has to be really, really bothering me, like it was with this deck. This is the Cosmic Tarot, and I definitely went ahead and chopped those borders off. But what it does, the other reason, besides you could fuck up and cut the wrong side off or cut into your card or make them really uneven, is the fact that they're always gonna be uneven. You can see how uneven that actually is. This is not a great job I did on these. My Navigator's Tarot came out a little bit better. I'll show you guys that. But they're slightly different sizes. I feel like no matter how precise and accurate you are when you're going through this, they're just not going to be factory good, cut by machine. They're really going to be perfect. And I think when you're shuffling and when you're pulling cards and stuff and working with the cards, I think it does affect it. If there happens to be one card that sticks out, even if it's just slightly a little bit more than the other ones, it's going to make you shuffle a little bit differently. Your hand might be drawn to it a little bit more. So I think it could, this is just me probably being a weirdo, but I think it could potentially affect your tarot readings. So I really, I've only, trimmed 3 decks that I have, and I felt like I had to do it. I'm happy I did it. I probably wouldn't use the decks unless I had done this, so it totally made it worth it. Now, this is the only other deck I'm going to show you that I trimmed. Navigator's Tarot, and it came out so beautiful. But be aware, this was not a mini deck to begin with. It had huge borders, so if you are gonna trim a deck, be aware you will be making it quite a bit smaller. And keep an eye on the backs too. When I first trimmed this deck, I left the titles on the card. Well, I forget if it was on the top or the bottom now, but all the titles of the cards I left on there for a while until I got more used to it. But it made a white border on the backs of the cards too, only on one side, like just at the bottom or the top or whatever it was. So eventually, after I got to know the deck much better, I went ahead and cut the names off of everything so that I'd have a nice even background. I personally don't have a deck that the backs have ever stopped me from trimming it because they wouldn't have worked. Like I said, I don't really look at decks like, does this need to be trimmed? You know, I just don't think that way. It's not something I ever want to do to a deck. So the only things that you need to trim your tarot decks or your oracle decks or your poker decks, your playing card decks, whatever, is either a pair of scissors or a paper cutter like this guy here. I have both. I went out and bought the paper cutter specifically to work with tarot cards, and I can't say that I really prefer one over the other. I feel like it's actually a little bit easier to be more accurate with the scissors maybe than this guy, but this is a cheap paper cutter, so that could be too. You have to watch, you know, I just change the blade every so often. It's like a couple bucks for extra blades for these things, because if it does start to get dull, you'll be able to tell on the edges of the cards you cut, they don't feel smooth, and it's really annoying, so keep an eye on how sharp your blade is. And people always say you should get good, sharp paper cutting scissors. I have no idea if these are actually paper cutting scissors, just a pair of scissors that I had on hand. Scotch, they're kind of gross and filthy, but they work. So something to cut with, even if it's just a pair of scissors, really it comes out exactly the same as if you've done it this way, I think. It's hard to be super, super accurate with this, you know? Which surprised me. I thought it would be perfect every time, but you're still gonna have these minute sort of movements when you cut into it, so it's just as good as using scissors, I think. And then the only other thing that you'll need is a corner rounder. All the stuff I got at my local craft store, I went out and bought it so I could hold it in my hand and see if it's really what I wanted, but you can get it online too, obviously. So I like this one because it gives you two options. If this little lever is flipped up, you get a corner that is a little bit fatter and rounder, like this, and like what I did on my Navigator's Tarot. And if you flip it down, you get a much tighter, kind of a more average tarot card corner. I love that it gives you both. I don't remember what the sizes actually are. This is the one I just did the other day, but you can see that's the difference in the two corners right there. White background. Yeah, so it leaves you with a slightly more squared off corner, but it's still rounded and looks very classic tarot sized. So I'm just going to show you exactly what I would do here. This is an extra card that I have from the Timeless Tarot, which I'm actually going to show you guys in a second. That's that deck sitting back there with those backings. And I edged it in this really cool, with this really cool marker that makes it look like it is gilded. It came out really neat. So basically, all that you do, so if I can get this on camera, is you go like this. You know, if say you decided you want to get rid of these borders, they're not annoying, obviously, on this card, but if they were bothering you, I would say I'm just going to go along all this. I'm not cutting out any words. My back is not completely reversible, but it'll look fine if we cut out that part of it. So, ready, go. Don't do that, by the way. I've done that so many times. You kink your card when you put if your blade isn't out of the way. But really, you just line it up there. I'm not going to worry about being super accurate right now. On mine, there's a little wire that runs in the center, so it lines it up pretty good for you. You just hold the card in place and slide it. Boom. One done. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like with scissors. You would cut all four on the paper cutter or all four with scissors. You have to kind of decide if you're going to go on the inside of the lines you're cutting against too or the outside. But if you fuck up, it's actually really easy to just kind of go over it again and even the whole thing out, even if it's with scissors. The rest of it is like this. Now, oops. This is the kind of thing that I would not do like while watching TV. I'd be way too scared. I'm gonna screw something up. Maybe music can be playing in the background, but like that's about it. So there is our trimmed card, and we didn't actually lose too much of the card. It doesn't look like it, but now all of a sudden it really does. It feels really teensy-tiny. So often there's cards like this that you can practice on and see if you like the feel of it, the size of it. I do the same thing when I'm edging. I'll see if there's an extra card. If there's not an extra card, I'll take an extra card from another deck because I kind of hang on to them, and I'll practice. On that card, I'll say, okay, I'm going to go along those lines, and then I can hold it and see how big it is. Same thing with edging. I'll edge that, and then I'll hold it up just to see if it sort of matches, if it's something I like. It works good. And then the next step is to decide the shape of your corners. How does this thing work? I'm gonna make sure it's always in, at least in a corner rounder like this. It's really easy to not have it pushed all the way in, and then you get a fucked up looking corner. There's a lot of trial and error involved in this kind of stuff, guys. Make sure you practice everything on an extra card first. Boom, rounded. Rounded. 3 and 4. Oh, see, I fucked that one up. So my corner rounder is actually jammed up right now, and it effed up my card. This, guys, this is why I hate trimming decks. To fix this, I've done it with other decks. I've had to go in and sort of just round it by hand, but it's not going to be even now. Like, that screwed up my deck if this was a real card. And there was really no way to tell that my corner rounder was jammed up. It doesn't happen very often with this thing, but yeah, whatever. Anyway, you guys get the idea. Maybe don't get this corner rounder, because it does do that every once in a while. The little corners don't come out. They're like in there somewhere. They get stuck sometimes. Anyway, usually it's much easier than that. I love that happened during my video. Anyway, you do that, 78 times. Pretty much. So it's a project, sometimes I split it up over a couple nights, and sometimes I'll just bang it out in one night. But like I said, it's not my favorite thing to do. I don't love it. But yeah, that's it. It's not bad. It's just a little mind-numbingly boring. Now, what is kind of fun, I think, I actually enjoy the process of edging decks. I think it's fun. It's sort of like the process I have of like picking out your tarot bag and your tarot charm, picking out the color for the sides of your cards. It sort of feels like that to me. Now, most of the time, you don't really have many choices as far as picking a color. If the tops and the backs are black, it's usually either go black or go with something metallic, and most of my decks are in those colors, but every once in a while something cool happens and there's a blue back and a blue front, and you can have a blue tarot deck. Yay. So I do prefer markers over something like this. I was one of those stampers. My mom was into it a while back. So I have all sorts of ink pads. I had them already around for a long time, and I had tried doing some ink pads with some decks, and I always ended up going over them with markers. I never liked it. It takes a really long time to dry, and I always felt like I had bleeding onto the cards. I never loved it. Markers, especially the Sharpies, if you use a Sharpie, it dries so quick. It's fantastic. You don't really have to worry. I still set them aside to dry for a few minutes, but it goes really quickly. So let's take a gander in here. As you can tell, it is mostly Sharpies. I try to get, if they're available, Sharpies that have a tip like that, like a brush tip. It makes it so much easier to just slide along and not worry about slipping. So any markers, most of these I got, I don't know what kind of marker this is. Marv, the Plume, these guys came in a whole set together, and they have one side teeny tiny, which I don't really use, but that has that nice big brush that I love. Not all of the Sharpie colors are available on that brush tip, so all the metallic ones that I have that little tip still. Most of my black ones have that little tip, and that's fine. You just got to pay a little bit more attention. I always like to have some of these Sharpies around with the little tip on one side and the big tip on the, or the regular size tip on the other anyway, because I mark a lot of my Marseille cards, and sometimes the big one works and sometimes the little one works better. But really the Sharpies are kind of my favorite to use almost, and they're really, really inexpensive. It's like $2 for a Sharpie. So I try to get the colors I need in a Sharpie version. These markers were very inexpensive too. It was probably like $10 for a set of 10 or however many came with it. And they really do work fantastic. This is the other marker that I use over and over and over again. That's not a Sharpie. I always have to keep buying this one. It's a little bit more expensive, but not by much. It's like $3 or something. It's not bad. I have it in a copper too, but I've never been able to use the copper. It's either a Recollections brand or this calligraphy marker. You'll find it by the calligraphy stuff. American Crafts makes this one, but both companies seem to make the same exact colors. So I'll buy the gold and this brand or this brand, and it's exactly the same. And they do have that nice longer kind of brush tip too. I'll show you what all these colors look like on my cards so you can see if it's something you want to get. I don't know why this is in here actually. Don't ever use this. I tried this once. It's a Sharpie poster paint marker. I was trying to get the metallic silver kind of a thing going, but it's really, I've used markers that have that ball in there or whatever that is that sounds like that, but this one is really, really watery. So yeah. Be careful. Don't use that. I should take that out of here. I don't even know if they still make this. I haven't seen these in the stores in a long time. It's also very water-based. Maybe that's part of it. Honestly, I have no idea what the bases of all my markers are. If they're toxic or non-toxic. I just try them out, and if it works, it works. Real quick, here's one more. I'm going to show you how this one comes out. It's a metallic leafing pen, and I tried it for the first time with a couple of decks, including my Tarot Apocalypsis. I really wanted it to have that gilded looking edge, and it worked pretty well. I'll show you guys how to make this work. It's still a little bit runny, so there's a way that I sort of went about it, and I'll share that with you. All right. Let's start with this guy though. So this marker is by far my favorite for creating like an aged effect on a tarot deck. It's a Copic Sketch marker, E31 in brick beige. It's not gonna focus. Whatever, E31 brick beige. And these markers come with two sides. One looks like that, like a chisel tip, which actually works great for the cards too. And my favorite, brush tip too. This is the only marker that I have and I continue to buy that actually costs quite a bit of money. It's like an $8 marker, I think. It's really obnoxious, but it is the only one I've ever been able to find to really create that effect with well. There was a lot of trial and error trying to figure out how to just make the sides not look, you know, ridiculously white. And what's sort of cool about this marker is if you take every card one by one and go along all the edges very lightly, you just get a subtle aged effect. And if you go around a couple times or push a little bit harder, you get a slightly darker beige. And if you take the entire deck all at once, or in like 3, 4, 5, pieces, hold the cards all together and go kind of back and forth across the whole thing, you get a really dark effect that actually, of course, it will bleed through in between the cards. That's why most of the time you should never do that. That's why you have to go one card at a time. Otherwise the color will get on the backs of the cards, on the front of the cards. But with something like this marker, you can totally do that with. It comes out really cool. It just creates this awesome looking aged effect around the fronts and the backs of the cards because it's the perfect color, and the way it seeps through, I don't know, it just works. Actually, let me show you what I did on the Usi deck here, my Pagan Otherworlds. Okay, so I actually grabbed my Pagan playing cards here. I want to show you guys something. Oh my god, I'm not sure if you can actually see it. There we go. See that little sort of stain line up there? It creates what an aged old card looks like. They recreated, almost looks like a tea stain kind of a look, And I didn't do that with my markers, but I added to it almost a little bit by taking the deck. I think I did this one in about 2 pieces. Taking, I held it against, something flat, my finger like that to keep the cards from slipping, and then went over. And actually, to get more of an effect, all you have to do is sort of angle them sideways and go over, and you'll get more on the fronts or the backs of the cards, depending on which way you push it. And it bleeds through in a wonderful way. You don't see it on the backs because they're busy enough, which was fine. And it just got rid of on the sides that really white sort of a look. These Usi decks aren't too bad actually with that stark white edges, but it was still much more white than these beautiful aged cards. And the Pagan Otherworlds has the same look. So now the sides must have a bit of a brownish look to them, which I like because I went over so much. I made it dark, but they have that tea stained look to them, like that corner up there. I don't know if you can see it, but some of my color ran over some of the ink, and it looks perfect like that. It's a perfect color for aging cards. I love it so much. Yeah, like that in the corner, that's for me. The cards already have it, but that's slightly darker up there. I don't know if you can see it. That's from where my marker, I can tell the difference, but I don't think anybody else would be able to. They matched up so well. And then here's the other sort of new deck that I just shared with you guys, the Brute Tarot. And this one was cool because it has almost a beige border on the backs, and then the fronts are like a creamy kind of a color. They don't have that same tea-stained, aged look as the Pagan Otherworlds and Pagan playing cards. So I went through and I did it the same way as I did Pagan Otherworlds and stuff. I wanted to see a little bit more of that aged effect. There was just something about the deck that I wanted to make it look a bit older. So you can see a little bit better when I spread it like this. See all that brown that sort of comes over. It literally makes it look like a tea-stained or aged kind of a deck. And I've done this with a lot of my decks. It doesn't look messy. It just makes them look old and a little bit more handled. Like, this is a brand new deck. And I just, like so many of us, I hate looking at, sides that just really don't match the fronts or the backs. I think it just looks weird. So I love doing this. So those are some decks that I did by holding, big chunks of cards together and letting the colors seep through. Okay, now here is a couple decks that I went over one by one. However, I did sort of angle around the card a little bit because I still wanted some to look like it seeped around the corners a little bit. It didn't have to be perfectly clean. I still wanted that aged look, but I didn't want the sides to get real dark. Here is a deck that I've never edged. It just sort of got dirty all on its own with use. And that's sort of what it looks like. And this is what I used. And that's what I use as sort of a reference, a regular dirty deck, to make sure I'm sort of on track, not going too far in one direction with a color so it doesn't look weird. It's definitely a bit more beige in color. This looks a little bit more yellow, but it's still, I think it gives kind of the same effect. So yeah, I don't ever need to really edge this deck. It's got that white borders anyway, but I love it. It just looks old and used, and that makes me happy. A nice broken in deck. But you can still see when you take like my Centennial Rider-Waite Smith, you can see some of a little bit of that edging sort of seep down onto the card. Can you even see that? There it is. You gotta get real close. See those little lines like whoop, up in there and over there? That's some of that color, and it just adds to the aged effect, I think. I like that. So for the most part, when I'm doing edging with this marker, I don't actually have to be really precise unless it's something I really don't want to see on the fronts of the cards. Now you can actually get, check this out. Look, this is the same marker I used. You can get that color or that color. And this I got by going over lots and lots of times. I didn't do this one by one, again, because I didn't mind if it went onto the fronts of the cards, because look at how, they're so big. Look at how amazingly aged they are. So that color going over in places just added to it. It doesn't look like a weird recreation of a deck of an aged effect anymore, because like it does when the borders or the sides are stark white and things on the front and the back are aged. It just looks fake and weird. So I feel like this has to be done. And I even like the corners got a little bit darker when you do this kind of stuff, but as they would when you're sort of using it, that gets, you know, schmuck all over it. Smudge, schmuck, whatever it is. You know, it just, as it does when you're handling a deck a lot, the corners sort of get a little bit darker and a little bit more messy. But that's the Pierre Madine Marseille deck. That gorgeous. It's the one that comes with the Mary Packard. That's a recent purchase. I found the whole thing for like $5, you guys. It was amazing. And then there's just one more little bit of magic edging that I was able to accomplish with this deck that I want to share with you guys. I did show it already in the review of this deck, the Isidore Tarot. This is one of those decks that it almost got trimmed. The borders were just bothering me. I don't know what it is. They didn't look like this when I first got them. They had stark white borders around here, and then this inner picture was aged and looks just like it does now. So what I did was I went around the edges of it, but I also drew onto the borders to give them that aged tea-stained kind of a look. And then I just smudged it off in little places with my fingers, set it aside, let it dry, and did them all that way. And now the borders, I feel like they match the aged effect that's on the inside pictures. It was such a strange look to me. I couldn't get over it. I left some of them lighter and some of them darker so it would look a little bit more natural. And then, you know, I went over the sides too like that. And it worked so good. Love that deck now. So anyway, that is the the Copic sketch marker in E31 Brick Beige. Fucking love that marker. So good. It comes in handy for so many decks. Now I did want to show you guys, actually let's do the leafing pen next. I just did some decks with this. I have been itching to experiment with it. I did try it first on, who makes this by the way? Rust-Oleum American Accents. I didn't just get it. I actually had this pen laying around the house from, I don't even know why I had it. I have no idea how old it is or if it's still available, but I know that you can find metallic leafing pens everywhere. Okay, so what I really wanted to at least try and get with my deck was something that looked a little bit more like this. This guy over here is sort of what you end up with, and I'll show you what markers I use for this. When you use a gold Sharpie or a gold, or the gold calligraphy markers that I have, it definitely has a reflective, it's still metallic, it looks beautiful, but it is clearly not that. I knew I wouldn't be able to replicate this exactly with a pen or a marker, but that's kind of what I wanted for these two decks. I wanted to see if I could do that. And it kind of did. Check that out. That is what a metallic leafing pen looks like. And this is on the Timeless Tarot. I just felt like it would work really well with this deck. And it did. I really like it. Look at how shiny and reflective that is. Now, it's definitely a different color. I'm sure you could experiment with colors. This one almost looks like a coppery gold in comparison to the gilded gold on the Tarot Illuminati. Not as reflective, obviously, but it has way more pop now than if I had gone over with, you know, one of these golds. See that difference? Just reflects differently. So the problem actually, oh look, I did it on my Tarot Apocalypses too. Like, this deck needs to be gilded, doesn't it? Now if you can see, actually look, you can totally see it on the camera. The reason that the bottom of that deck is reflecting way more, and it might be me, I might have to experiment with how I do this a little bit more. But yeah, you can see it on all four sides. Those cards down there are reflecting so differently because they're not because they're facing the other way, because these are the cards that I have yet to clean up. Let me get a good one out. Oh, there's a really messy one. So, do you see all that gold that got onto these cards? This marker, it's one of those. Like, it's much more liquidy. The way that I went about this at first was I would take my card and try to just go along the edges of each one. And I did a few, and when I looked back, there was a lot of gold along the edges that just looked messy. I was like, oh, shit. It does come off not very easily. You have to sort of take a paper towel and just back and forth a few times to sort of clean up the card. I would definitely not recommend using a marker like this on any kind of a papery deck. What's really papery? I don't know. These, you know, if you know the Timeless Tarot, if you know Tarot Apocalypsis and Tarot Illuminati, they're not plasticky, but they're coated enough where they're not like super papery. Especially the Timeless Tarot. I will say it came off easier on the Timeless Tarot because it's even more coated. This is the kind of thing you could do on the Mary L Tarot, absolutely. Most Los Scarabellos, you know, all the kind of popular decks. Like I would never even attempt it on something like an Il Metagello that's like super papery. It would probably just make a whole mess. So what I realized anyway after I was doing these cards one at a time was that I had to go back each card every time and clean it up anyway. So I decided to do what I was doing with my beige marker and just take the deck in sort of bigger groups to save me some time, go along the whole thing, and then go back and clean up what went through. And a little bit more definitely seeped through when you do it this way, but I had to clean up every single card anyway, so I was like, fuck it, it's fine. And that's why I did for this deck too. I took it all in certain groups. So yeah, these are just the last few cards that I actually still have to go through and clean up. That's like by far the worst. Mostly it's like little, I mean, there wasn't anything on that card, like little stuff like this. Can you see that down at the bottom? Just a little bit sort of gets over on the card. So I'm just going to take my paper towel and just wipe that off. Now the other thing that happened, however, when I was wiping everything off, it didn't take off the gold on the sides of the cards, not at all. But you can tell now that it did dull them just a little bit. It's really actually very subtle. When the light hits it, it looks a little bit worse. Look at that, you can hardly even tell the difference now. It's not that bad, it just makes them look like they've been used a little bit already, I'd say. Yeah, it's not that bad. But it does dull it just a little bit more. I don't know, maybe you guys will be better at it than I am and not get it on the fronts and the backs of the cards, but I have been edging cards for, you know, a long time. I have a lot of practice. I am able to do things like this, where, you know, you don't want to see the color on the front or the back. Like this is a metallic marker. I didn't want to see that on my beige fronts, and I didn't want to see it on my green backs, and I was totally able to go through and keep it just on the edges by hand. But I was not able to do that with that marker. It's just too runny, you know? Here's another example of that, actually. This is my Masonic Tarot, and I wanted to edge it really bad. Even though it has white borders around the front and white borders around the back. So this was another instance where you go one card at a time and you fucking pay attention and you make sure that it doesn't run all over your cards. And it's very, very doable with the right markers. Now, let me show you what those markers are. Back into the marker treasure box. Stay. So the golds that I've done things in is the Sharpie golds and the calligraphy pen marker gold. Like I said, I've seen the same exact color. It comes out the same when I buy it from different companies. It's like the same exact gold. But they offer two very different golds. They're really different looking, and I like them both. So this guy here, my Oswald Worth, is done with the Sharpie gold, and let's pull out a different one. My Thoth deck here is done in that sort of antique greenish gold, and it's this. That's the Sharpie pen. This is the slightly more greenish gold. This is more of a yellowy gold when you compare them. And let's do just that. Oh, that's hard to hold. There we go. Can you see that? It's funny, it's so clear in person. And then the camera, I think it does lose something. Actually, looking at it now, I feel like maybe just because this one looks a little bit darker and the yellow gold is a little bit lighter, it looks like the Sharpie actually reflects the light a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you just want an older kind of greenish gold. I definitely use this marker in this color a lot more often. Maybe it's because I have a lot of old decks. But again, this was one I had to be really, really careful with. Oh, I saw a little smudge there because of the white borders and the white backs, but this pen, especially that brush tip, really just lends itself to being able to just ever so slightly graze all four sides of the card. The Sharpie, it's a little bit more tricky because you can only find this, or I can only find this gold in a smaller tip. But again, with both of these, if you do slip up and you catch it, I lick my thumb usually, and I just wipe it off the card, and it comes right off. If it's a little bit more difficult, I'd take something textured, like a paper towel, and either rub it or add a little bit, lick it, or add a teensy little bit of water if you need to scrub it. But usually the textured part of the paper towel gives you that extra little bit that you need. That's why I had to use it with the painted cards. Couldn't get it with my fingers. I'm just sliding over it, like there's a little bit to clean up too. And no matter how long you let it sit there for, it does still come off. Look, I got it off. There was a little smudge down there and it came right off. But usually it doesn't actually take the whole thing off the sides because they tend to be not coated the same way, the sides of the cards, you know. So basically that is the two different golds that I use. This one doesn't really have a number on it. If you go to, I don't know how they sell these things online, but if you go to the craft store, there's usually a section for like calligraphy markers like that. And there's a whole bunch of different brands that actually looks like make the same thing. And there's one gold color, and all of them seem to be that same gold color. I don't know if that's like a calligraphy thing, that kind of greenish gold color. But no matter what brand I get, it always comes out the same. And then the caps don't really tell you much. Like this one just looks more green. This one looks more yellowy gold. And back into the box of fun. So this Crayola marker that you see on the top here, by the way, this made its way into my tarot marker box because of this deck. I wanted so badly to do this in orange, but I couldn't find a marker that was good, that matched, that had the right color. It does have a black back, this deck, but the fronts have a nice, cool orange border. I love that. And I just didn't want to do in black. I'm like, I have so many blacks, and then I was scared, you know, if it does run a little bit, you will clearly see a black along the inside or along the fronts of the cards, along the border. So I tried whatever markers I could find. Nothing worked. Things were too red or too orange, too dark. And I was like, fuck it, let's try a Crayola marker. Dude, it worked so good. I did go one by one with these cards, as I do pretty much everything, except I like that gilded and the beige. Everything else is pretty much always one at a time like this. But I had to go a few times over to get it to the right color. And I don't mean like I went once around, let it sit. I just boop, 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 just went around like that to darken it up to the right color. And it works so good. This does not come off in your hands either. It's fantastic. And then the red that I have here, I have now been able to use on 2 decks. So much fun. These big Sharpies, by the way, have those brush tips. Love them. And I did these 2 guys in red because they have red backings. Look at them. So this is the one I just showed you guys in the Oswald Worth video. I didn't, this is one I cut out by hand, so look at that. You can actually see the red on the fronts, from the fronts of the cards. And that's because they're hand cut, you know, it's not a perfect edge that you're working with. But look at that, it matched up so, so good. It was the perfect red. That's just the Sharpie red. And then this deck, this is the Syzygy Oracles. It's just like a Majors Only deck, but again, look at that. Red backings, black fronts, but I used just a red Sharpie, and it made for the coolest little thing. When you're able to throw a fun color in there, I think that it's just makes your deck look so unique and different. I love that. What other sort of odd ones are out here? Oh, I have my blue one right here. I've been able to do a couple decks in blue actually too. And this was done also with a Sharpie. I do have some other brighter color blues that I wasn't really ever able to use. There it is. Regular navy blue fine point Sharpie. Look at that. Not a pretty color. Love the color. I love the way this one came out. It has that sort of navy blue front and navy blue borders. This is the Tarot of the Mystic Spiral, by the way. And, you know, no crazy white borders. It's amazing how even if the color doesn't match perfectly, like, you don't notice it at all. Like, that orange really isn't the same color as is on the back either, but it just, I don't know, it works. Looks clean still. Okay, so here are some decks that I have done with a silver Sharpie. So I did this since I last showed my pop culture deck. Actually, I just edged this one recently. I decided to go ahead and do it. By the way, this is what a gilded silver deck looks like. That's the Fountain Tarot, and that's the difference you get when you use like a Sharpie. Again, it's not as reflective. I'm sure you could get one of those like silver leafing pens or something. Hi, Michonne. To get something a little bit more reflective. I don't have a silver one, I just have the gold, but I like the way the silver Sharpie comes out. It almost has a bit of a gray look to it, but it's still way more reflective than if you use like a gray or a non-metallic marker. And these are my borderless cards that I made myself, my pop culture deck. If you guys want to see more of these cards, by the way, I have a video up. It's the part 2 of like make your own tarot deck thing. But yeah, that looks like that. And then I did decide, I was having such a hard time trying to figure out what color to do my Tabula Mundi in, because for goodness sakes, look at those backs. I was like, oh my God, so many colors would work. However, it does have, they're not quite white borders around all the cards, but it's I don't know what you'd call this color, off-white, whatever it is, a little bit more creamy, beigey looking. So I knew I didn't want to do black. Again, no matter how careful you are sometimes, I didn't want to see anything on the front. And in some cases the silver went a little bit, but it's like light enough that it doesn't jump out at you at all. And I love the way it came out. I'm really, really happy with it. I wanted something a bit more reflective. It has those awesome holographic backs. Look at all that color. And the silver, I think, just came out so perfect. Again, it's not quite a gilded silver, but it has the same effect, really. I think it looks similar. So I am super happy with both of those guys. All right, and I have had 2 occasions in which I was able to do a tarot deck with a brown edge. That's the Tarot of Inspiration there, and the Osho Zen Tarot. Again, the Osho Zen is another one. I see a lot of people do it in black, and I thought about it, but it has so many different colors on the back that you could sort of get away with all sorts of different things. I think a red would look beautiful. But I went with a brown, and I went with a very different brown than I used with the Tarot of Inspiration, that guy. They're 2 very different browns, and I used 2 different markers. I actually don't have the marker anymore that I used for the Tarot of Inspiration. It ran out and I tossed it. But I don't even remember what it was. It wasn't the Sharpie brown. I know that. It was something I had probably, I think it looked like one of these. These two, I actually used both of these for the Osho Zen deck. They're actually the same exact color. Even look how different the tips are, though. But it's the same exact color. You do see some variation along the sides of my cards there, and it may be from that, so they may not be exactly the same color. But this one was starting to run out, so I made it work by combining two different browns. But I like it. It's like a little bit more of a reddish brown as opposed to the dark brown in this one. But so much fun. Isn't that great? It's so fun when you can do cards differently. The Tarot of Inspiration is a borderless deck, basically. So, you know, I just tried to be careful as I went around so that dark color didn't go over any lighter areas. And it worked out well. This one was super easy. I didn't have to be too careful. More so on the backs, I had to be careful because of some of the areas are lighter around there. And if you do go over, it would show. But you don't have to worry about the backs because they're black. And if a brown goes over them, you really don't see it. But they came out gorgeous. And lastly, I'll dig back in here for one more. The last color that I've been able to use a lot on my decks is black. I much prefer to use a big marker like this, especially if it's a card that has black borders and black backgrounds. Just makes it easier. Boop, boop, boop. If it bleeds through, it's fine. It doesn't matter. But all these Sharpies work fantastically. I wish I had occasion to use one of my green markers. I'm still excited to make a deck green. Although the Sharpie cap here looks really, really bright, both of these come out actually a little bit on the darker side. And the only deck that I go back and forth all the time if I want to make it green or not, I haven't edged it at all, is the Tarot of the Sevenfold Mystery, because it has those great green backs, but it has really incredibly white borders around the card, so I'm a little hesitant to do it, but I'm probably going to give in and go ahead and edge this guy green. I think it'd be really pretty. If I do it, I'll show you guys. But black is probably my favorite thing to do to the edges of a tarot deck, to black them out. It makes them look so cool. So, I don't know, I just love the way black looks, especially on sort of shinier cards like this. This is the Prairie Tarot. Black backs, black borders, and the black edges just look amazing. It's so funny, you know, you can love a deck, and then when you edge it, it's like, oh my god, I love it even more. Look at how cool that looks just sitting there. And then of course, I mean, I have lots and lots of decks that are black edges, but I grabbed these two because they just look so friggin' gorgeous, all edged up with the black backs and the black borders on the front. Isn't that gorgeous? I feel like my Marielle, I don't think I've ever had to touch up these shiny Marielle cards. They haven't faded out really that much. Maybe it's because they're a little more plasticky. There's a couple places on the Prairie Tarot that I do see like chipping and some white spots. I'm probably gonna have to touch this guy up pretty soon. I guess with the black you do notice the fading quicker than with some of the other colors anyway. But it still always lasts like, I don't know, I usually get a good year out of it before I have to touch up any deck really. At least a year. Okay guys, screw it. It's happening. I decided I'm going green with the Tarot of the Sevenfold Mystery. And I can show you how I edge too. Normally there's not a camera in between my arms, so bear with me. I'm going to try and be real careful. This is again why I love that chisel tip. It allows you a little bit more movement before you go sliding off the cards. If you find yourself sliding a lot too, by the way, you're probably pushing too hard or not hard enough and going off it. Just mess with your pressure a little bit. Oh, I think that's going to match up good. Oh, I do have to be really careful there, though, because look at that. That comes right over. Oh, yeah, we're going to be real careful. That Sharpie dried real fast on there. I got most of it off. You know, I feel like when you do a dark color, though, you're always going to... And there's whites around the fronts. You're always going to have a little bit of color sort of show through. I am angling it this way, yeah, that worked really good. If you don't want it to, you know, go on the other side at all, if you go at it from the side, you don't mind getting a little bit more on, like angle it down this way. I would never, with this, come at it like that, or you'll totally get it along the border you don't want it on. But that's working pretty good. So, like I said, sometimes, where was I? Sometimes it doesn't, you don't have to be so incredibly precise, but with something like this, shit. Oh, that came off pretty easy. You just want to be a bit more careful. That worked out really good. I find the less back and forth you have to do, the cleaner you'll make everything look also. But that's it. Not too bad from the front. It did go on the back a little bit, but that's alright. And then what I do is I set them aside to dry so it doesn't smudge, although I'm pretty sure at this point it's already completely dry. Usually it goes a little bit more like that. Oh yeah, I'm getting better, see? Nothing on the borders. Let's see if we hold those two together, how it looks so far. I just started a project that's gonna take me all night, right? See if you can get the idea with 2 cards. Oh, I think that's gonna look good. It actually looks like it matches up really well. It's hard to tell now. One of them looks a little bit lighter. I might have to go over twice or a little bit harder to get it as dark as the border, but we shall see. Oh, it's gonna be fun. All right, my first green tarot deck. It's been decided. So yeah, if you guys have any other tarot decks that you've edged with some interesting colors or using some interesting markers, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to see them. I got so much inspiration from all you guys and your videos and how you go about trimming and edging and the cool things that you guys have come up with has just inspired me so much. But yeah, tarot art is fun. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Mwah!